Having finished the work on the roof, we can now move on to some equally important work on the exterior and interior walls. But before we can start on that, there is some scaffolding to move around, a lot of tidying up, and some deep cleaning to do. And with the team probably only here at the start of the week, it'll just be me on my own with the birds and butterflies for company. But on Monday, the team would be on site to start and hopefully finish the big tidy up. And it was a beautiful sunny morning to be back at the house and opening up. Three of the team arrived in the van and got straight into tidying on the church side with the removal of the scaffolding. Below the repointed section at the top, which gives an idea of how all the walls will eventually look. At the back of the house, there were a lot of tiles and brickboards to move, some of which would be taken off-site in the truck that Haggy had just arrived in. But most of the curved and flat tiles would be moved to the front to keep them secure for future use on other things. And with the truck loaded for its first takeaway, before Haggy drove off, the team got started on removing the scaffolding on the front, which we will need to use on the entrance side for the next bit of work. With tiles moved and materials removed, the focus at the back was now a clean-up of the waste and rubbish, which I took a break from for some lunch, followed by watching some of my favourite butterflies. With the tidying almost complete, the focus shifted to preparations for next tasks. In my case, loading water deposits around the house for some major water use the next day. While the team loaded the truck for a final takeaway, and then started work on raising scaffolding at the entrance side. The team were due to be on another site for 2 days and back for a day before they had a bank holiday on the Friday. But as I said goodbye to them, I was pretty sure this was the last time I would see them this week. On Tuesday, with the scaffolding down and the team away, I had planned to make the most of their absence, which would require a bit of setting up once I had opened up. With the deposits almost full, the pump and now the Karcher connected, I am just about ready to start the first big cleanup of the outside walls in about 18 months, all in preparation for some repointing work by the team and I over the coming weeks and months. I will talk a bit about the process that I'm following while the work is going on, but hopefully by the end of today, all the walls and the joints within them are all going to look a good deal cleaner. And my pre-clean drone flight would also give me a first clearer view of the house with its new roof. My plan was to carefully use the full power cleaning mode of the Karcher on all the walls, each of which had slightly different requirements. On the front wall, the priority was to remove all the dust from the roofwork rubble and to clear out some of the old mortar joints, especially the higher up parts, which I hadn't cleaned out as much previously. In the middle section, my focus was on cleaning the newer stones in the filled-in drain cavity. While on this next wall, which we mostly rebuilt earlier in the year, there was both dust and some bits of modern mortar to clean off the stone surfaces and some of the joints. Up to my mid-morning coffee break, I was reasonably pleased with my progress and the amount of dirt I had cleared, although the walls were not necessarily looking that much more attractive at this stage. After the break, I started on the front of the extension, but the power mode was now not working so well due to a bit of a problem with the bearing in the nozzle tip. Rather than stop completely, I switched to the hose gun, which meant that all the work would now be more of a surface clean rather than the deep clean out of the joints. But on this wall, which was mostly rebuilt this year, this wasn't a problem, as the focus was more on cleaning dirt off the stones. To minimize the number of changes to my setup, the next walls to clean were the ones I could reach from the church corner, so I now moved to the wall on the church side. Where the focus was more on recent dust and mortar from recent work, although certain patches would have benefited from a more powerful wash, but I will have to do some manual cleaning on them anyway. The final work of the morning was on the right side of the back wall, where there was plenty of old joints that need clearing and patches of newer dirt from our recent work, some of which I was able to clear. And with the hose connections at their limits, it was time for a change in pump position and then some lunch. I was reasonably pleased with how the back wall had cleared up, but some parts of the back I will only be able to clean properly with some hand tools, which is a similar situation for the final sidewall that I was now moving on to, which with its higher walls is also much more difficult to work on without scaffolding in place, and which is going to get a lot of manual attention anyway very soon. As you can see, by the end of the day, the walls were looking a bit patchy, but a lot of dirt and waste had been removed and washed off, which should make all the upcoming repointing work a lot easier. With the team away on Wednesday, I had a break from housework and caught up on a lot of admin. But I was back on Thursday for a different type of prep work for the coming weeks, where some of the work will be inside and focused on some final structural elements, including work on the lintels and tops of various doorways. And I now wanted to review some possible options for these, involving the reuse of some of the better beams we removed during the roof work. After the first beam cutting, I had my first surprise visitors for the day, who were on a long trip to Europe from Australia and were passing by. And after a very nice chat, I was back to beam cutting. After a quick coffee, I now wanted to see how the beams might actually look when the dirt was removed and the surface of the wood was cleaned. After a brush down, I intended to use an old sander that I already had, but I wasn't sure how effective or efficient it was actually going to be. After some initial sanding, I had some more surprise visitors, this time from a neighbour with a group of friends who were enjoying a morning walk on the track past the house. Back to the brushing and sanding, and I was starting to see how the cleaned wood might look, and I think confirming that it is a local pine wood. After just about finishing a first part of the beam, I had my third visitor of the day, who had very kindly contacted me in advance as he was on a trip to the area from his home in Canada. This is very generous of you. Oh, it really is. No. After a late lunch, it was back to beam piece cleaning. But with my old sander struggling a bit, I decided it was time for a trip to the hardware store for some general supplies and a new, more powerful option. Which, once set up, was definitely helping speed things up, enough that I stayed a bit later than planned for one final piece. On Friday, it was the clearest and warmest morning of the week and perfect conditions for some more work outside. First of all, on some final beam pieces, the first three of which I was pleased with their new look. The next pieces were slightly dirtier, and I decided more cleaning was needed before any sanding. First with the brushes. And then, following someone's suggestion, a light acid wash to clear the dirt, especially mortar-related dust. Before doing any sanding on a damp surface, I moved the piece into the sun to dry out and moved on to the next one. I am no expert on reusing old wood, and I understand there are different options and approaches to take, but for these beams, I decided I want to see them as clean and new as possible before deciding whether to use them and what finishes I might use. And I would be very interested to hear anyone's view on this, especially C. Ferguson's if you are watching. While I waited for both pieces to fully dry off, I moved on to a similar task, this time involving the only two existing wooden lintels, which I wanted to clean up a bit and review their look and condition. I believe these two lintels are oak, with some old paint on parts and some plaster stuffed in cracks or spaces. And the lead builder had suggested some light brushing and a small bit of acid to clear the mortar and plaster dust and stains. With one done, I returned to the now dry pieces for some sanding down. With a small amount of acid mix left over, I used it on the stones in the filled-in cavity where the power wash had only been partially successful. And with the beam work done, it was time for lunch and some final butterfly viewing for the week. After which I was back to some cleaning on the sidewall where plenty of careful manual work is going to be needed to clear the old cement render, especially on the curve where there are a lot of brick patches, which the head builder and architect like the look of, but about which I am less sure. So for the final work of the week, I wanted to clear a patch to see how it might look and also test how my new mortar rake might work in the joints. Before replacing the mortar rake on the grinder with a metal brush, I wanted to check how it would work on an older lime mortar joint and also indoors on trickier sections. Happy with the rake's work, I was back on the brick patch for a final clean. before a final tidy up of the week. And that is the end of work for this slightly shorter and slightly different week, which started with the team tidying up after the roof work, including taking down the scaffolding from here in the front. To give a first clear look at the wall with its new cornice and new gutter, and to enable me to more easily power wash the wall and remove a lot of the dust and loose mortar. And although the results of that power wash are a little bit underwhelming, it is at least a very good start for the work we have to do to repoint all of the exterior walls. Just as the cleaning up and sanding down of some of the old wooden beams is a good potential first step in using them as doorway lintels inside. And then this afternoon I have briefly been back on this side wall, clearing the mortar joints and more cement render in preparation for the work next week at repairing and repointing all the walls on this side. So please do tune in again next week to see how we get on.